Okay, so we'll begin. Welcome everyone. This is our third session looking at the text, the 7-point mind training. And this is really a beautiful, wonderful, and precious text because it teaches us how to cultivate positive states of mind, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhichitta, the aspiration to become fully enlightened, a Buddha, to be able to help all living beings. So this is a really wonderful thing to do for ourselves and for others and for the world. So this text gives us all kinds of very precious advice on how to transform our mind and, bring our mind closer to enlightenment. But, these methods are also really helpful for us in our present life. They help our mind to be more happy, peaceful, calm, be able to get along better with other people and so on. So we're really, really fortunate that we have this opportunity to study this text and learn how we can bring about this positive transformation of our mind. So let's begin with a few minutes of meditation to calm down our mind and get our mind into a good state, have a good motivation for participating in this session. So make yourself comfortable. It's good if you can keep your back straight, because that helps the mind to be more clear and focused, alert. But at the same time, let your body be as relaxed as possible. Let go of any tension you may have anywhere in your body. You can imagine that it just leaves your body and sinks down into the earth below, or just evaporates in space and disappears. And let your breathing be natural. Let your breath flow in and out in a natural rhythm. And with your mind, with your awareness, just pay attention to the breath as it's flowing in and flowing out. Let go of any other thoughts there may be in your mind, like thinking about things you did earlier today, or thinking about things you're going to do later today or next week. So put aside all thoughts of the past, the future, and anything else, so that you can just let your mind be right here in this present moment, in this present place. So being aware of the breath coming in and going out really does help our mind to be in the present. So just do that for a few moments. Now let's take a few more moments to generate a positive motivation for participating in this session. So bring to mind an act of kindness, either something you yourself did, where you helped somebody who is in need, or you could think of an act of kindness that you saw somebody else do. Could have been to yourself, they helped you when you were in need, or some other person you just observed or witnessed somebody doing something kind and helpful to another person. So doing acts of kindness or witnessing acts of kindness awakens something in our heart, that feeling of kindness, of caring for others and realizing they need help and they wish to be treated with kindness and they appreciate kindness. So kindness is something we all appreciate. And it's something we all have. We all have kindness in our hearts. And it's a very precious quality. It's the source of happiness and health, long life. And it's also needed in the world because people need help, especially children and elderly people and disabled people. And it would be terrible if nobody gave them the help that they needed. But fortunately, people are kind and do take care of others when they are in need. So it's beneficial for everyone, for ourselves and for others and for the world. And in Buddhism, there are many methods we can use to increase kindness in ourselves so that it's more a part of our life, even to the point where we feel it all the time. We're always in a state of kindness and compassion. So as we listen to these teachings tonight, which are about increasing kindness in ourselves and in the world, see if you can have this intention or motivation to increase kindness and compassion in yourself so that you can make your life more and more meaningful and beneficial for others, for the world, and help all of us have a greater peace and happiness and eventually all reach enlightenment. Okay, so when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, so again, we are looking at this text called the 7-point mind training. And so there are 7 points about training the mind. And the first of the 7 points is preliminary practices. So in the text, it says, first train in the preliminaries. And there are 4 preliminary practices. Preliminary practices means these are practices we need to learn about and think about and meditate on, reflect on, in order to bring about a state of mind that's ready to engage in the actual practices of thought training, mind training. And so the 4 preliminaries, we've looked at these already in the first 2 of these sessions. So the 4 are the preciousness of our human life. That's the first one. So that's basically just realizing that we're really fortunate with the life that we have, being a human being with healthy body, healthy mind, and good conditions in our life, plenty of the things we need, food and clothing and a roof over our head and medicine and so on. So the things we need to have a healthy, comfortable life. But more important than that, more precious than that, is that we have the chance to learn the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, which basically teach us how to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, and how to bring about peace and happiness and develop the causes of happiness all the way up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. So from the Buddhist point of view, having this kind of life with these conditions is very, very precious. And it's also quite rare. Most of the beings in the world, in the universe, don't have these conditions. So we're kind of really fortunate that we have them. But then we need to make good use of our life and not waste it, mainly because it's not going to last forever. We have a certain number of years to live. At the most, I mean, sometimes we hear about people living to 110, 115, or 15, 16, something like that. But that's like the maximum amount of time that a human being can live. And most people only live to somewhere in their 80s or 90s at the most. And time is running out constantly. So every day, every minute, every second, our life is getting shorter and we're getting closer to the end of our life. So it's important to realize that, so we don't waste our time and instead use our life in good ways, in positive ways. Okay, so that's the essence of the precious human rebirth, the first of the 4 preliminaries. And the second one is death and impermanence, which I kind of talked about already, but that's where we contemplate how, yeah, death is definitely going to happen to us. And many people want to avoid thinking about death, but that's not very wise, because then we won't be prepared for it when it happens. So the Buddha said it's very, very important for us to realize that we are going to die and keep that in mind and live our life with that awareness. Because if we live our life knowing that we're going to die, then our life will be much more careful about what we do in our life. We won't be doing things that we'll regret at the time of death and feel bad about, and look back on our life and think, oh wow, I did so many bad things, so many harmful things, and feel really bad and worried about what's going to happen next. So that would be very tragic. And instead, if we live our life wisely and carefully, which basically means trying to do good as much as we can, do what's virtuous, what's beneficial, what's meaningful with our life, and refrain from doing anything that's harmful, like, negative actions, non-virtuous actions, like the 10 non-virtuous actions. So use our life in a good way. And that way, when we come to the end of our life, we'll feel peaceful, satisfied about the way we lived our life. And our mind will be in a good state. And then, from this life, it will be guaranteed that we'll go to a fortunate rebirth in the next life. So that's already going into the third of the 4 preliminaries, which is karma. So karma is basically about how all the actions that we do make a difference. The actions that we do, karma actually means action. So the actions that we do leave imprints, seeds in our mind that become the causes for our future experiences, especially future lives. So it's like right now, the way we live our life, we are creating our own future. We are creating our next life. The kind of person we will be, the kind of body we will have, the kind of experiences we will have. So what kind of life do we want? Do we want a miserable one with a lot of suffering, a lot of problems? Probably not. And if we want a good life with a good body, good experiences, then we have to make sure we create the right causes, good karma, and avoid bad karma, negative karma. But from the Dharma point of view, having, thinking about the future, thinking about our future lives, We shouldn't be thinking just, oh, I want to have a good life so I can enjoy myself, have fun, have a lot of pleasure, a lot of wealth, be able to do all these wonderful things. So that's not the right way of thinking. Instead, because our ultimate goal, our long-term goal is becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha to help all living beings, then we want to make sure in our next life and all our future lives, we will have the most ideal conditions in which we can continue to practice and follow the path and create the causes for enlightenment. We continue going in the direction of enlightenment. So as a Dharma practitioner, somebody following the path, that's the kind of life that we wish for, we hope for in the future. But again, it's not just hoping or wishing or praying to the Buddha, please, give me a good life next time, but it's creating the right causes. So again, it's in our hands. It's all dependent on how we live our life. So we have to basically avoid non-virtue, create virtue as much as we can. Watch our karma. And okay, so first preliminary is precious human rebirth. Second preliminary is death and impermanence. Third is karma. And the fourth one is the nature of cyclic existence, or samsara, how it is in the nature of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So we need to think about this, because we need to realize that, even if we get good rebirths in our next life, in our future lives, we have good conditions, but as long as we're still in samsara, we're still subject to death and rebirth, then we're not really free. And in fact, we're I don't know, some analogies are used, like being in a burning house. Samsara is like being in a burning house or a burning building. There's no place you can go where you're safe and comfortable and you can just relax and enjoy yourself. Or another analogy is a big ocean full of all kinds of dangers, like sharks and monsters and, high waves and storms and so on. So if you're just stuck in that ocean, it's not a good situation. You want to get out. So samsara is like that. The whole of samsara, even good places, even the human realm, the God realms, the supposedly wonderful places to be reborn, they're still suffering. We're still in samsara. So we need to realize that, so that we generate the wish to get out of samsara altogether and attain liberation or nirvana. So we don't normally like thinking about suffering. We try to avoid thinking about it, but it's very important that we do think about suffering, the problems of samsara, because that's the only way we'll be able to generate this attitude, which is called renunciation, or a better term is determination to be free. It's this certainty that I want to get out of samsara. Samsara is not a good place to be. I don't want to stay here. I want to get out. So we can only develop that by understanding the suffering, the unsatisfactoriness, the problems of samsara. So we just looked at those four things in a quick way, because probably most of you are familiar with them. You've heard teachings on the Lam-rim, studied the Lam-rim, the path to enlightenment. And those 4 points are explained very extensively in the Lam-rim. So we just need to keep them in mind and not forget them. And these 4 preliminaries, in some traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, they are called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. So if we think about these things, reflect on these things, then the result is that our mind will be interested in the Dharma and really want to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma as much as possible in order to free ourselves from suffering. But these four reflections, 4 preliminaries, are preliminaries to the development of bodhicitta, which is the main topic of this text. So that's what we're coming to now. So the next point we're looking at in the text is the cultivation of bodhicitta, which is the aspiration to become fully enlightened, to help all living beings. So in some versions of the text, there's two kinds of bodhicitta explained in the text. One is called conventional bodhicitta, and the other is ultimate bodhicitta. And in some versions of this text, the 7-point mind training, ultimate bodhicitta is explained first. And then after that, conventional bodhicitta is explained. But this version of the text has the other way around. Conventional bodhicitta comes first and ultimate bodhicitta comes later. And to me, that makes more sense, because the meaning of ultimate bodhicitta is it's the direct realization of emptiness that is conjoined with or supported by conventional bodhicitta, the aspiration to become enlightened, to help all living beings. So ultimate bodhicitta exists only in the minds of certain beings. Arya bodhisattvas, that is, bodhisattvas who have attained the direct realization of emptiness, and Buddhas. So those are very highly developed beings who have ultimate bodhicitta in their minds. And before you can have ultimate bodhicitta, you first have to cultivate conventional bodhicitta. Because ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom directly realizing emptiness that is supported by conventional bodhicitta. So if you don't have conventional bodhicitta, there's no way you can have ultimate bodhicitta. Yeah. And chronologically, that it does come first. The development of conventional bodhicitta comes first, and then ultimate bodhicitta comes afterwards. So it makes sense that we start with conventional bodhicitta, and then we'll look at ultimate later. Okay, so conventional bodhicitta is just what we normally understand as bodhicitta. It's a state of mind, an attitude that is strongly determined to attain Buddhahood, to attain full enlightenment, Buddhahood. And the reason for doing this is to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so actually your real goal, what you really want to do, is to help sentient beings, all sentient beings, not leaving anybody out. That's what you really want to do, is to help sentient beings. And you realize that the best way to help sentient beings is for you yourself to become a Buddha, to reach Buddhahood. Because as a Buddha, you will have the greatest amount of qualities and abilities and skills and whatever you can possibly have to be able to help others. Because as long as we're just an ordinary being like we are now, you know, even if we want to help others, but we're very limited in what we can do. We only have this one body and these two hands, and you know, so we can't help all the living beings. But if we become a Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha, then we have many more opportunities to help others. Because, for example, a Buddha is able to manifest many bodies, actually countless bodies at the same time. That may sound hard to believe, but this is what they say. A Buddha is able to just create all these emanations of different forms and just send them out all over the universe to help sentient beings in whatever way is possible. So that's just one quality that a Buddha has, but that, you know, with that you can see that a Buddha can help many, many beings at the same time. So that's the meaning of bodhicitta. It's the thought or the attitude, I will become a Buddha in order to help all living beings. So bodhicitta is something that everybody can develop, and there are ways to develop it. So there's two main methods for developing bodhicitta, cultivating bodhicitta. One is called the 7-fold cause and effect method, which you're probably familiar with, some of you. It starts with thinking about all sentient beings having been our mother and so on. The other main method for cultivating bodhicitta has 5 points, and it's called equalizing and exchanging self and others. So that is the method that's explained here in this text, although it doesn't sort of explain each and every point, but the commentary does. The commentary that I'm using, which is called Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun. So we'll go through these 5 points starting tonight. I don't know if we'll finish tonight, but we'll at least start going through these 5 points of this method for cultivating bodhicitta. So the idea is you meditate on these points again and again and again, and gradually you develop more and more compassion and love and concern for sentient beings. And eventually you can get to the point where just naturally and spontaneously there arises in your mind this determination to become a Buddha, to help all living beings. And when that happens naturally and spontaneously, like just without making any effort, but bodhicitta will just arise in your mind. Anytime you see a sentient being or think of a sentient being, just automatically there will come up in your mind this feeling, I'm going to become enlightened in order to help this being and all other beings. So it just comes up effortlessly and naturally. So when it gets to that point where it arises naturally, that's the point at which you are a bodhisattva. Okay, so bodhisattva is a person who has developed bodhicitta to the point where it just arises by itself, just naturally and spontaneously. So they say it's similar to, like, if you haven't eaten for a long time, your stomach is empty, you're very hungry, then without making any effort, your mind just thinks about food. Some people think about food even when they're not hungry. But definitely, when we're hungry, thoughts of food just arise in our mind, just naturally, spontaneously, without having to, make effort. Okay, so they say in the same way, in a bodhisattva, the thought, I want to help all sentient beings, I want to become enlightened to help all sentient beings, that kind of thought just arises naturally and spontaneously in their mind. So that's the meaning of a bodhisattva, a real bodhisattva. So before going into the method, the 5 steps of this method for developing bodhicitta, let's look at the benefits of cultivating bodhicitta, because it does take effort. We do have to put a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy into developing bodhicitta. So we need to be motivated. We need to have a strong interest in doing this. So yeah, bodhicitta is what makes us a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is a very, very, very precious being. I'm sure you've had the opportunity to meet certain teachers, especially Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who comes to Singapore very often, and just observe how he lives, how he behaves, and how he's just constantly, all the time, day and night, thinking about others and doing things for others and just totally dedicating everything, his whole life, to others. So that's one good example of a bodhisattva, what a bodhisattva is like. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama as well, if you've had the chance to meet him and get teachings from him, he's another amazing example of someone who's just totally giving everything to others. So bodhisattvas are very, very precious, very wonderful beings. Yeah. So if you have a chance to meet bodhisattvas, then you might feel inspired. Yeah, I want to be like that. That's how I want to be. And then a bodhisattva, you have to become a bodhisattva first, and then a Buddha. So being a bodhisattva is like on the way to becoming a Buddha. It's a bit like a medical student. If you want to be a doctor, first you have to become a medical student. You have to be admitted to a medical school and then start doing all the studies and the work and so on and so on. So a medical student is someone who's on the way to becoming a doctor. In the same way, a bodhisattva is someone who's on the way to becoming a Buddha. And in this book, the Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, there's a quotation from a sutra, the Gandavyuha Sutra, which I think in English it's sometimes translated as the Array of Stalks Sutra. That's one of the Mahayana sutras. So it's pointing out all kinds of benefits of bodhicitta. So I won't read all of them, but just some of them. I chose some that I find really appealing. So it says, bodhicitta is like the earth on which the whole world depends. It is like the king of wish-granting jewels, which perfectly fulfills every purpose. It is like armor guarding you from improper thoughts. It is like an axe felling the tree of disturbing emotions. It is like a hook which draws you out of the waters of samsara, cyclic existence. It is like the condensed teaching that encompasses all the prayers and activities of the bodhisattvas. So it's something that's really good for us if we develop bodhicitta, because we become a really wonderful, precious person, and everything we do is beneficial and meaningful for others. It's also a way of purifying our negative karma, our afflictions, all our obscurations. So these get, well, purified, at least reduced. We actually have to have the wisdom realizing emptiness to completely get rid of the obscurations, but at least we can reduce them to a great extent with bodhicitta. And everything we do with bodhicitta creates vast amounts of merit or good karma, virtue. And everything we do with bodhicitta, again, is meaningful and is a cause of enlightenment, bringing us closer to enlightenment. But not only that, it's also a cause for all the good things on the way to enlightenment. Okay, so probably enlightenment will take a long time to get there. But on the way to enlightenment, as a result of cultivating bodhicitta and doing things with bodhicitta, then we'll get good rebirths in all our future lives. We'll have really good conditions. We'll have happiness, good experiences. We'll have lots of friends. People will love us. And we'll get all the realizations on the way to enlightenment, such as calm abiding and the wisdom realizing emptiness and so on. So we just go from one good thing to another. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we'll never have problems. We shouldn't have that expectation. Bodhisattvas have problems too. But because they know how to use problems, they know how to transform problems, then problems don't get them down. And instead, they can actually utilize these problems as part of their practice to increase their bodhicitta and create merit and bring themselves closer to enlightenment. So those are some of the benefits of bodhicitta. And in Shantideva's text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which probably many of you have studied, in the first chapter of that, he mentions the benefits of bodhicitta. So just one verse from that, he says, "Those who wish to destroy the many sorrows of their conditioned existence, those who wish all beings to experience a multitude of joys, and those who wish to experience much happiness should never forsake bodhicitta." So it's the source of all that is good, all that is beneficial, all that is meaningful. Okay, so do you feel interested in bodhicitta now? I want to do that. I want to develop that. Okay, so the next two lines of the text say, banish the one to blame for everything. Meditate on the great kindness of all beings. So those two lines refer to this method of equalizing and exchanging self with others. Okay. So as I said, that, you know, in a more expanded way, this method has 5 points. So the first point is equalizing self and others. So our usual attitude is that this one, me, is the most important one. Yeah, we all feel that way, so don't feel bad. You know, it's just a natural attitude we all feel that this one here, I, me, myself, is like the center of the universe, the most important person of all. Everything revolves around me, and others are secondary. Others are less important. So just for example, when there's like a war going on, if your country is at war with another country, or if your football team is fighting, is playing another football team, or anyway, something that is connected with you, a group of people connected with you in relation to some other group of people. So we tend to be very much in favor of our side because it's my group, you know, it's my country or my football team or my family or my neighborhood or my group, whatever it is. They are more important. So we feel very happy when good things happen to my group, and not happy if good things happen to the other side. Okay, so that's just an example of how this sense of self-centeredness or self-importance plays out. And in so many ways as well in our life, you know, we don't like to wait in line, in queue, right? When you go into the bank or grocery store or whatever, you know, there's a queue. We tend to feel impatient and we want to get to the head of the queue. Even some people push other people aside in order to get ahead. So these are just some examples of ways in which our sense of self and self-importance manifest in our life. So is it right? Is it right to have this attitude? I am more important than others. Like the Dalai Lama says, you know, most countries, well, probably the countries we come from anyway, have democracy. And in a democracy, we say the majority is more important than the minority. So whoever the majority of the people vote for, that is the person who wins the election. Okay, so that idea, you know, is quite common in the world. But when it comes to, you know, me and others, we tend to feel I am more important, even though I'm just one person, and others are many. In fact, they are numberless, but they are less important than me. So he says it's good to think about that. You know, does that make sense? Is that democratic? Anyway, so it's good to recognize how we do have this attitude of self-importance. I am more important than others. And if we can see that that attitude is not helpful and it's not reasonable, and it's, well, from the point of view of cultivating bodhichitta, it's definitely something that's in the way, it's a hindrance. And so we need to correct it. So to correct it, to change it, there's the meditation on how we are actually all the same. We are all equal in various ways. So one way in which we are all equal, that means me and everybody else, is that we all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. So that sounds like a rather simple idea, but it's very profound if we really meditate on it, if we really contemplate, you know. And it's good to do this one person at a time. Really focus on individual people. Get their face in your mind and have a mental picture of their face, and then think about how, just as I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer, that person also wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer. And then do that one person after another. Yeah, so you can actually do a whole meditation on that. I don't know if you've heard of Jeffrey Hopkins. Jeffrey Hopkins is one of the first Americans to get involved in Tibetan Buddhism, and he's written a lot of books and so on. And one of his books, he talked about how his first teacher, his very first Tibetan teacher, taught him this meditation. And he would sometimes stay up all night, just sitting all night meditating and going through all the people in his life, starting from when he was a little kid. And just think about one person at a time. That person wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. That person wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer, and so on. They spent hours, the whole night doing that. And I thought, wow, that's really dedication. But you can imagine it would really have quite a profound effect on your mind. So you might want to try that. And don't leave out the people you don't like. Remember, they want to be happy too. They don't want to suffer too. And other ways that we are alike, from the Buddhist point of view, we all have Buddha nature, meaning we have this potential within us to be totally free of all suffering and causes of suffering, and to be fully developed in all that is positive, all the good qualities and realizations and so on. And we can all become Buddhas one day. We will become Buddhas one day. Yeah. So that's another way in which we're all the same. Nobody's better than anyone else. Nobody has more Buddha nature than another person. There may be some who are closer to Buddhahood than others because they've done more work, more practice in past lives and so on. But eventually we will all get there. We will all reach Buddhahood, enlightenment. So that's another thing that's helpful to think about. And in that way, we are all the same. We are all equal. But unfortunately, we are all also the same in being in samsara. Samsara is a very unpleasant situation, full of lots of sufferings and problems, and we're all in it together. My mother used to say, this is saying, we're all in the same boat. And, you know, when people are experiencing some difficulties together, like now with the pandemic, you know, at least in the beginning, I don't know now, but in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people were reaching out to their neighbors and helping their neighbors. Sometimes people they'd never talked to before, but they started thinking, oh, that person, they're all alone and maybe they need help. Maybe I can buy them some groceries, or, you know, call them up or whatever. So there was a lot of acts of kindness being done because we kind of woke people up to the fact that we are all in this situation together. We are all experiencing these difficulties together, and I want to reach out and help others. So that thinking about how we are all in samsara is also very helpful to equalize ourselves with others. And in some teachings, they also use the analogy of a doctor. A good doctor, a doctor who's doing his or her job properly, they're supposed to help everybody who needs help. So let's say they're waiting, let's say like, yeah, there's an epidemic going around, and there's all these people sitting in the waiting room of the doctor. Maybe 20 people are sitting there, all having the same sickness, the same symptoms. So a good doctor would give time to all of them, would, you know, treat all of them, and not say, okay, I'm going to help you, but not you. Get out of here. Okay, they lose their job, actually. They lose their license if they did that. But anyway, many doctors, maybe most doctors, really do care about their patients. They care about their job. They do their job well, and they really do want to help anybody who needs help. So that's a good analogy for this kind of meditation. Realizing that we are all the same being in samsara, we are all the same having suffering and the causes of suffering. We are all the same in having the potential to be free of suffering. And that's what we want. We want to get out of suffering. We want to have happiness. We want to reach liberation and enlightenment. So we are all the same. So is it right to regard one person as more important than others? That one person being me. So thinking in this way can help to reduce our self-centeredness or emphasis on our own self. Okay, so that's the first of the 5 points in this method for cultivating bodhicitta. The second one is the disadvantages of self-centeredness. Okay, so here we go kind of a little bit further and look at how, if we do have this attitude of selfishness or self-centeredness, it's actually counterproductive. It's actually bad for us. It's not good for us. And if we can realize that, then we'll feel even more incentive to overcome the self-centered attitude. Now, I'm using the word self-centered rather than self-cherishing. You know, many of the texts and many teachers use the term self-cherishing. But that can be a little problematic. It could be misunderstood. It could sound like, oh, cherishing yourself is bad. And that could sound like you shouldn't be nice to yourself. You shouldn't take care of yourself. So it doesn't mean that, actually. And I'll read something later. The Dalai Lama talked about this the other night when he was teaching. So it's not that it's wrong to be kind to ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to cherish ourselves. But what is harmful is having an extreme sense of self-centeredness, like I am most important and others are unimportant, because that kind of attitude is unhealthy. That kind of attitude leads to suffering and problems. So that's why I think it's better to say self-centeredness or selfishness, because I think then it's more clear that we're talking about an unhealthy attitude. So Shantideva, in his text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, says, whatever suffering there is in the world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy, meaning this extreme form of selfishness or self-centeredness. So that's actually said to be the source of all suffering, all problems. So when we do run into problems, when we do experience problems, our usual reaction is to put the blame on others. Yeah, blaming our parents or blaming our partner or spouse or blaming our neighbors or blaming the government, the politicians. So we always try to find someone else out there to blame for whatever problems we experience. But according to these teachings, the root cause is self-centeredness, selfishness. So how does that work? How is that the case? So according to karma, the law of karma, cause and effect, if we experience a problem, let's say getting sick, let's say getting COVID-19, okay? Because some people get it and some people don't, right? Even when, you know, people are exposed to it, not everyone actually gets it. Not everyone gets sick. And even those who do get it sometimes have just mild symptoms. They don't get very ill. Other people get very ill and sometimes even die. Okay. So according to Buddhism, the main cause for any kind of suffering or problem or bad thing that happens to us is our karma, the karma that we created in the past. And specifically, bad karma. Okay, it's bad karma, negative karma, that is the cause of bad experiences that happen to us in this life. And when we do a negative action, it's usually, maybe always, I don't know, maybe exceptions, but most, if not all the time, it's under the influence of self-centeredness. Okay, so for example, getting sick, having sickness, and maybe even a life-threatening sickness. This is possibly the result of killing in the past, killing somebody or shortening somebody's life, or doing something to interfere with another person's health and long life. Okay, So as a result of doing that in the past, we have the karma that can lead us ourselves to be sick, to have a short life. Okay, so when we did that action in the past, in the previous life, I mean, we don't remember it, but this is what the Buddha says. The Buddha says, killing is the cause of having a short life and having health problems and so on. So when we did that kind of action in the past, why did we do it? What was going on in our mind? What was our motivation? Sometimes it's out of hatred. You know, a lot of killing is done because of hatred. You hate that person so much. You feel you don't have the right to live anymore. I'm going to take you out. Okay, so doesn't that sound like selfishness? Doesn't that sound like I am more important than you? I know you don't want to die. You want to go on living. But I think you don't deserve to live. I think you deserve to die because I think you're hopeless, you're terrible, you're a jerk, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you're a bad person. So I have decided that you should die. So doesn't that sound like self-centeredness? Extreme self-centeredness, putting me ahead of somebody else. And the same when people kill animals. That's usually done out of attachment. Sometimes out of hatred, yeah. Some people shoot their neighbor's dog because the dog is barking and keeping them awake at night. So killing animals can be out of hatred, but often it's out of attachment because they want their meat, they want their fur or other body parts. Like in Chinese medicine, they use all these different body parts from animals. And so a lot of animals are killed because we want to take parts of their body for our bodies, to eat their food, to eat their flesh, or to wear their fur or whatever. So doesn't that also sound like self-centeredness? I am more important. The animal doesn't want to die. The animal wants to go on living, but we want their body parts. And so we decide, okay, you're going to die so I can have these body parts. So self-centeredness. So I think if we look at any act of non-virtue, any non-virtuous act, any harmful act, and what motivated that action, I think we'll always find self-centeredness, selfishness. I am more important. My needs, my wishes, what I think is right, what I want is more important than anyone else, even to the point of destroying another being's life or taking away their belongings, in the case of stealing, or speaking harshly to them, saying harsh words to them, and lying to them, and so on. So if we go through the 10 non-virtuous actions, and we can probably in all cases find that they are motivated by self-centeredness plus other delusions like attachment, anger, and so on and so forth. So the point here is selfishness does motivate us, incite us to engage in non-virtuous actions, harmful actions. And that means we create bad karma and then in the future experience the results of that bad karma. So I guess to accept this, you would need to accept karma. You have to believe in karma and also reincarnation, because, you know, you might look back in this life and think, well, I never killed anybody. I never, you know, maybe I stole little things, but nothing really big, nothing really bad. But Buddhism says we've had many lives before this one. And in our past lives, we have done harmful things. We've done every possible kind of harmful thing. I had difficulty believing in that for a while, but the more I looked at my mind and looked at the kind of thoughts that come up in my mind and the kind of feelings that come up in my mind, I came to feel, yes, I think definitely I've done some negative things because I still have these impulses in this lifetime. I haven't acted them out, but at least the impulses are there. So I've come to accept that, yeah, I think it's true. I know I have done harmful things, terrible things in past lives. So as a result of those negative actions in past lives, we can experience, painful results, painful experiences in this life. So I hope that's clear, the connection between selfishness and our own suffering, our own problems. Selfishness motivates us to do harmful actions, non-virtuous actions, which in turn become the cause for bad things happening to us in later lives. So that's why it said that selfishness or self-centeredness is the cause of all suffering. But we can also see, just looking in this present life, without having to think about past lives, just in our present life, if we look back at times when we've had like relationship problems with parents or siblings or schoolmates or teachers or your partner, your spouse, your children, if you're a parent. So whenever we have problems with other people, again, the tendency is often to blame the other person. Oh, it's because of what they did or because of what they didn't do. But if we really look carefully and honestly and sincerely at our own mind and what was going on in our own mind, and also our behavior, what we did, what we said, most probably we will find I acted selfishly. I was thinking of myself more than them. So we can also see then that how self-centeredness gives rise to problems here and now. So this is what we are called to do, to look at this attitude of self-centeredness, identify it in ourselves, recognize it, don't pretend it's not there, don't be in denial that it's not there, but be honest about it. And then recognize that it's not a good attitude, it's not a healthy attitude, it's not one that leads to happiness and peace and benefit, but it leads to suffering and problems, both now in this present life, and also as we go from life to life, because it can motivate us to do negative actions that give rise to suffering in future lives. So the line in the text that says, banish the one to blame for everything, that is referring to this, the self-centered attitude, the selfish attitude. The one that's to blame for everything isn't me. Okay, we have to understand that. We're not saying I am to blame for everything. I am the bad one, but it's this attitude in our mind. Okay, this tendency, habitual tendency we have in our mind to think of ourselves as being number one, the center of the universe, the most important one. I always need to get my way. Everybody has to be nice to me. Everybody has to do what I want them to do. Nobody should go against me. Nobody should be mean to me. Okay, so that I, me. That attitude, that tendency. It's not who we are. Okay, we have to be clear. This is not who we are. It's just a state of mind that comes and goes. It's not always there, but it's there quite a lot. But it's only a state of mind. And it isn't something permanent. It's transitory. And it's something we can gradually decrease, reduce, and eventually be free of altogether. Okay. So it's very important to clarify that it's not me, this self-cherishing or self-centered attitude isn't me, it's just some part of me, some part of my mind, some aspect of myself. So when it says banish the one to blame for everything, the one to blame for everything is that attitude. Okay, self-centered attitude that pops up in our mind. That is the thing that is the cause of all suffering and all problems. So what we need to do is recognize that and say, no, I am not going to let myself come under the influence of that attitude anymore, I'm going to work on reducing that attitude. And we'll look at ways of doing that afterwards. Okay, the next of the steps in this meditation, number 3, is the advantages of cherishing others. Okay, so the previous one, we're looking at the disadvantages or the harmfulness of the self-centered attitude. And now we're looking at the opposite attitude, which is cherishing others, or we could also call it altruism. Altruism means caring about others, regarding others as important and precious, and really valuing them and cherishing them. So the line in the text that comes next is, meditate on the great kindness of all beings. Meditate on the great kindness of all beings. So that refers to this point in the meditation. Because in fact, others are precious. Others are valuable. And we just need to realize that. And that itself will enable us to have greater love, greater kindness, greater compassion for them. So cultivating loving kindness and compassion for all beings is essential for the path to enlightenment. And it's also good to recognize how, if we do have altruism, love, and compassion, and so on, that is the source of all happiness. So like Shantideva says, whatever joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. So all happiness and goodness and good things in the world come from altruism, from cherishing others. So one way of understanding that is, again, looking in terms of karma, because when like good karma, virtuous karma, is the cause of happiness, is the cause of good experiences, like good rebirths. Like the fact that we're human beings in this life. We have a human body rather than an animal body or a hungry ghost body. So the fact that we have a human body and a healthy human body, mostly, we have a little sickness, but we're pretty healthy. And we have food to eat and we have all the things we need. So we have this good life. So this didn't just happen by accident, but it's the result of good karma that we created in the past, mainly ethics. The main cause for human birth is ethical conduct, meaning living a good life, not harming others, doing good, and so on. So we must have created a lot of good karma in our past lives to be here, where we are now, and have what we have now. Yeah. And what motivates us to create good karma? Well, good thoughts, caring about others, mainly. Mainly it's thinking of others, wanting to benefit them, wanting to not harm them, living a life in kindness and consideration for others and non-harmfulness towards others. So we must have done that in the past to be where we are now. And also, if we have resources, if we're not like totally poor, totally impoverished, but we're well off, at least have enough, and even if we're not rich, but at least we have enough. So that's the result of giving, generosity. So giving is the cause of wealth, or at least having what we need. So if we have what we need in this lifetime, that means we must have practiced giving in a past life. And again, why do we give? What motivates giving, generosity? It's also caring about others, unselfishness. Okay, I have extra food and that person looks hungry, so I will share my food with them. Okay, so altruism, caring for others, cherishing others, motivates virtuous actions, good actions in one lifetime, and that in turn brings about good experiences in another lifetime. So those are just some examples of how altruism leads to happiness, leads to benefit. Benefits others, of course, but it also benefits oneself, the one who's doing these virtuous actions. And in the book, the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, it talks a lot about the kindness of others. For example, so this is another very helpful way of increasing altruism, is thinking about how kind they are to us. So you're probably familiar with this meditation where we contemplate how everything we have in this lifetime is due to the kindness of others, like this very body. You know, we need to have a body to have a life. And this body that we have came into existence through the kindness of our parents, our mother and our father, who fell in love, made love, and we came out. Okay, so this body is a result of our parents, and they also took care of us when we were very tiny and helpless and needed 24-hour care. So they were there and fed us and cared for us and, you know, did everything so that we could grow up strong and healthy. And then they sent us to school, and there we learned from our teachers. And as a result of that, now we are adults and we have a lot of knowledge and skills. We can work, make a living, take care of ourselves, buy a house, car, whatever we need, and so on. So absolutely everything in our life is dependent on others. All the food that we eat is made by others. The clothes that we wear are made by others. The house or apartment we live in, made by others. All the raw materials, the wood, the concrete, the glass, the furniture, all made by others. Okay, so we are totally dependent on others just for these basic necessities of life, and also the things we enjoy: music, movies, books, sports. Okay, we're also dependent on others for those things. But in addition to that, those of us who aspire to reach enlightenment, to become enlightened, we can't reach enlightenment without others. Our attainment of enlightenment is dependent on others. And that is because to reach enlightenment, we have to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta for every living being. We can't leave anybody out. We have to cultivate these qualities for every single living being. And we also have to engage in, like, the 6 paramitas, practicing giving, practicing ethics, patience towards every living being. So without sentient beings in relation to whom we are cultivating these attitudes and engaging in these activities, there's no enlightenment, no way to attain enlightenment. So for example, if you just think of somebody, bring to mind somebody you have trouble with, someone you have difficulty with, someone you don't like very much. It could be your boss, it could be some politician, okay, a neighbor, noisy neighbor. Okay, think of someone you find kind of annoying or irritating, difficult to like, difficult to have good feelings for. Okay, so believe it or not, that person is very important for you, is actually very precious for you. Because if you want to attain enlightenment, which is the most wonderful, high, blissful state there is, it's only possible if you develop loving kindness for this person and compassion for that person. So you have to feel love and compassion for this person. You also have to feel bodhicitta for this person. You also have to think, I want to help this person so much that I will do everything that needs to be done to reach enlightenment. And then I will help them until they reach enlightenment too. So you have to have that kind of feeling towards this person. It may be hard to do now, but eventually this is something you have to do. And if you don't, you won't be able to reach enlightenment. If you can't cultivate these positive qualities for that person, you won't be able to reach enlightenment. You see, so that's how this person, you need this person. You depend on this person for your attainment of enlightenment. Now, you may not realize that right away, but think about it. That's something to think about. You also have to practice generosity and ethical conduct and patience in relation to this person. So it may be hard to do. You may not be ready to do it now, but eventually this is something you need to do. And it's not, and it's a good thing to do. It's good for you, because if you can cultivate all these positive qualities towards this person and do all these positive things in relation to this person, then not only are you creating the cause for your enlightenment, being able to achieve this wonderful positive state of mind, but even now, even here and now in this lifetime, your mind will be much more happy, peaceful, positive, because you won't have all these negative thoughts and feelings like anger and annoyance, irritation, and you won't be creating negative karma towards this person by thinking bad thoughts or saying bad things about them or doing bad things to them. Okay, so it's for your benefit. It's for your own benefit to cultivate these positive qualities and engage in positive actions towards this person. So these are just a few thoughts, a few ideas, and I thought maybe I should stop at this point and give you some time to ask questions if you have any questions about anything I've said so far. And if you do have this book called Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, then there's a lot in there that you can read about how to, think about the kindness of others. And those are very important thoughts to read about, think about, and meditate on in order to open up your heart more and have more kindness towards others. Okay. Any questions?
If there's any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, Doris, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Venerable. Hi, this is Doris.
Hi, Doris.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Venerable, earlier on you were saying that you read something from His Holiness about the difference between cherishing yourself and loving yourself, or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I'll read that. So I think it was last weekend he was giving teachings on Chandrakirti's text to a group of Indian scholars, Indian students, and there were questions at the end. So the last evening, well, it was evening here. I guess it was Sunday morning in India. Anyway, somebody asked the question, can self-compassion help to generate bodhicitta? So if you have compassion for yourself, forgiveness for yourself, can that help you to generate bodhicitta? And so when His Holiness replied, he was actually referring to this method that we are looking at now, this method of equalizing and exchanging self for others, in which, there was this discussion about cherishing yourself, cherishing others, and so on. So he said, just as you cherish yourself, you should cherish all other sentient beings. We don't say that you should abandon cherishing yourself, because you yourself need to attain Buddhahood. When it says, hold others dear and abandon yourself, it doesn't mean literally not to work for yourself as such. And then he spoke about how the Buddha, the Buddha practiced in order to achieve his own enlightenment. Okay, so it seems to be, he was saying, we have to take care of ourselves in the sense that we have to develop our potential for enlightenment. We have to do all the things that need to be done to bring ourselves to the state of enlightenment. So we're not abandoning our own well-being, our own welfare. And then he went on to say, what you need to get rid of is the extreme self-cherishing thought. The reasonable cherishing of self is not something you need to abandon. I mean, he didn't really explain the difference between the extreme self-cherishing and the reasonable one. But I'm just guessing, the extreme self-cherishing thought is the one that's just like super, super selfishness, self-centeredness. I am more important than everybody else. I can kill people and steal and do all these bad things to others because I am more important than everybody else. So that's the unreasonable one, the extreme one. Whereas the reasonable self-cherishing is, okay, I want to be happy too. And what can I do to make myself happy? Develop my potential for enlightenment and bring myself to enlightenment. Okay, so that's a kind of cherishing of self, but it's a reasonable one, a healthy one. As then he went on to say, the cultivation of bodhichitta helps oneself in order to help others. To help others, you must experience bodhicitta yourself. Just like he said, if you want to be a teacher, if you want to teach a certain subject in school, you have to know that subject so that you can teach it to others. So in the same way, we have to know enlightenment. We have to know the path to enlightenment ourselves so that we can help others, teach it to others. So he says, first you try to know the causes of suffering and get rid of suffering. And then from your own experience, you share the teachings with others. So that's what he said. And yeah, you can make of that what you wish. Yeah, I think some of the statements that we come across in traditional teachings can sound like, almost like we should beat ourselves up, and especially many people, like Western people, many people in the world today already have very negative views about themselves, and even self-hatred and self-criticalness and self-loathing and so on. So we already have that tendency. And then when we come to the teachings and read about these teachings on, oh, self-cherishing is so bad, and you should kind of beat yourself up, it just increases those attitudes. So I think perhaps His Holiness has picked up on that and realizes that, we need to phrase things somewhat differently in order to make sure we don't beat ourselves up more and instead treat ourselves with kindness. And I've also heard him say that, he says, you have to have compassion for yourself. If you don't have compassion for yourself, you can't have it for others. Okay, so all this talk about the disadvantages of selfishness or self-cherishing is not meant to be, a reason to hate ourselves or beat ourselves up. That's not the correct interpretation. Is that clear? Doris, are you there?
Hi, Venerable. I couldn't unmute myself, so I've just done that. Thank you very much. Yes, that's clear. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is Ida. Ida, please unmute yourself.
Hello, Venerable. Thank you very much for your kind explanation. I really enjoy your talks. You mentioned earlier on there was like one day everyone will be a Buddha and we will reach there. But looking at all the negativities and defilements that we have within ourselves and the world, how is that even possible? You know what I mean? It's like so unreachable, you know. Maybe can you try and elaborate a little bit more? How is it possible that we can even reach there? You know, even though it's our aspiration right now that yes, that is our ultimate goal, you know. But to be born in another as another human being, that too is looking at our own negativities. That might be just a lucky dip, really.
Well, I mean, being discouraged, having discouragement, like, you know, these kind of thoughts that you're expressing, is not helpful. It's understandable, yeah. When we look at the world, or even if we just look at our own mind, then yeah, sometimes it can be quite discouraging, and we may feel, oh, how could I ever reach enlightenment with this mind of mine? But it doesn't help to think that way. I mean, we are very fortunate that we have teachers alive in the world today, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and many others, who themselves have totally dedicated themselves to studying and practicing the teachings. And we can see the result. We can see these wonderful qualities in them. And you know, they had to go through difficulties. They weren't always like that. They didn't always have these qualities, but they worked on themselves and developed themselves, and probably not just this lifetime, but probably for many lifetimes. And so they are like living examples of how it is possible to transform ourselves. We do have to work. We can't expect it to be easy and quick. You know, that's not realistic. It does take time. They say even the Buddha himself, it took him many, many lifetimes, many eons, in fact, to do everything that was necessary to reach enlightenment. But I know in my own experience, sometimes I do feel discouraged, but then I think I don't want to go in that direction. There's no point in letting myself slide into that state of mind, because then you might even get to the point where you feel, well, why even bother? I might as well give up. And I know that's not helpful. So I just encourage myself to get out of that state of mind. And I think about the Buddha and the many Buddhas and bodhisattvas and the spiritual teachers that I have met, and just think they did it, and they are doing it. Some are still on the way to enlightenment, and I can do it too. And they're there to help me. It's not like I'm all by myself, all alone, having to struggle on the way. But I mean, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you're never alone. Wherever you are, and at any moment, there are countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you, looking at you, observing you, ready to help you. And you just have to turn your mind to them and open your heart to them, and they will be there to help you. So if you get discouraged, though, and feel hopeless, then it's like you're closing your mind. You're closing your mind, closing your heart to the help that they have to offer you. So we have to keep up a sense of hope, a sense of optimism, a sense of courage, a sense of, yeah, it is possible. And we just have to keep going and not give up. And also not worry so much. I mean, sometimes people ask the question, well, when will everybody reach enlightenment? Can you give me a date? It's not possible. You know, we can't say that. And so I don't think we should even ask that question or worry about that, and just keep going in that direction. And as you go along the path, you should find things are getting better and better. If you really are practicing, if you really are putting your energy into practice, then you will find things are getting better. I can say that with myself, with certainty. And then, yeah, if we're creating virtue and cultivating compassion and love and so forth, then when we come to the end of this life, we'll be able to have a positive state of mind, at least if we can take refuge, strong refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or even in just the Buddha, or even in just our spiritual teacher, then that will enable us to avoid an unfortunate rebirth and have a fortunate rebirth in the next life. So focus, I suggest that you just really focus on the positive teachings, positive aspects of the path, and yeah, don't let your mind get discouraged or worried or hopeless. And also don't feel alone. You're not alone. Buddha's with you.
Thank you. Baby steps, I guess.
Sorry? Baby steps. Yeah.
Steps.
Baby steps. Yeah. Also, there's this other saying that I like. They say that if you have a big bucket and you put it under a faucet and there's just one drop of water coming from the faucet, one drop at a time, eventually the bucket will be filled up. So it's like that with our practice. You know, we just do one thing at a time, one virtuous action, one act of kindness, one meditation on loving kindness. We just keep building up our virtue more and more and more and more, and eventually we'll have a whole bucket full, big bucket full of virtue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Faye. Yeah, Faye can
Hi.
answer.
Hi, Venerable.
Hi.
I wanted to ask about, so you know, in terms of developing bodhicitta and putting ourselves, putting others before ourselves. I have an issue with like insects. I find it very difficult, like especially when it comes to like mosquitoes and cockroaches. Like it's very hard to develop bodhicitta towards them or loving kindness. And I'm wondering, like, what advice do you have? I mean, I know theoretically, you know, intellectually to think they just want happiness and don't want to suffer, but it's still very hard to develop that. And yeah, so I'm wondering, like, what advice do you have, or what do you do to not have that? Like when I see a mosquito naturally, I have this annoyance.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I noticed. I mean, I used to, I guess as soon as I became a Buddhist and, you know, I took it all very seriously, then I stopped killing insects. And, but I still didn't really like them, you know. I wouldn't kill them, but I found it hard to sort of feel positive feelings towards them. And, but I'd noticed over the years, slowly, my attitude starting to change. And I mean, I guess it's, yeah, just because of years of doing these kind of meditations and looking at them and trying to think that, oh, they haven't always looked like that, you know. That's this lifetime, they look like that. They have that kind of form. But in another lifetime, they look differently. Maybe they were very beautiful. Maybe they were my mother. You know, they say everybody has been our mother. So even that mosquito, once upon a time in some other life, was my mother and looked very different. And I saw her as beautiful and, you know, wonderful and so on. So I would just kind of say those kind of things to myself. And also just recognizing how fragile they are. Yeah, like they're so tiny and so fragile. And instead of seeing them as an enemy trying to harm me, I realized, well, I have to be really careful to not harm them, because I can just by moving my hand, I might do something harmful to them. And that would be terrible. I don't want that to happen. So those are just some of the thoughts that I had. But at some point I noticed, it's been some years now, I noticed that my attitude has really shifted towards these creatures, and I no longer feel so much aversion towards them. And I feel like protective. I have this feeling of protection. Oh, it's a sentient being, and I want to put it someplace where it won't be harmed. So it's just something that slowly changed over time. But I'm very glad. I'm glad. It's a much nicer state of mind to have, you know, to care about these creatures instead of seeing them as annoying and irritating and ugly. I mean, some of them I still have a hard time with, like cockroaches. I don't know, they're really hard. But at least I don't want to harm them. Okay, and that's already a good thing, you know, to try not to harm them and
Like,
try
do
to
you
help them
feel
instead. So just give yourself time. Just slowly give yourself time. The mind, it takes time for the mind to change. You can't make it change like that, but slowly it will change.
so? It's like similarly. Do you feel open about them like biting you then, or like?
Well,
for
you don't
mosquitoes?
have to let them bite you. You know, you can put mosquito repellent or put a mosquito net around your bed or just blow them away. You don't have to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good luck.
Next is Mui Chen. Mui Chen, can unmute yourself.
Hello, Venerable. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Today, what I actually took away was the expression when you say that when we try to generate a sense of regret, we do not have the attitude like of blaming ourselves, like, but then we are actually blaming the self-cherishing attitude. So when we do in practice, when we are trying to do the four opponent power, I realized that actually the process of generating regret actually caused myself to grasp, in fact, harder to the inherently existing I. And then I kind of like try to blame myself. It's like, I know intellectually I have like studied emptiness, but in actual practice, when we try to generate sense of regret in practice, actually I find my mind actually grasping harder to the sense of I, and then develop a sense of like, oh, I'm bad. And then how do you then differentiate between a healthy sense of regret and demeaning, self-demeaning guilt when we practice the four opponent power?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that it's good to contemplate that when we do something wrong, we do a non-virtuous action, okay? What happens? I mean, why does that happen? It's because we don't have complete control over our mind. Our mind is full of all these afflictive emotions, especially ignorance, grasping at inherently existing I, and then out of that, there comes attachment, there comes aversion, there comes all these afflictive emotions. These are just coming up in our mind without choice. We don't choose to be that way, right?
Yes.
Nobody chooses to be that way. It's just like a sickness, right? Nobody chooses to get sick, but it just happens to us. So these things come up in our mind without our choice, without our control, and we're not developed enough, you know, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do this action. No, I'm not going to follow this thought. So they're still very strong in us. And so they motivate us. They kind of take over our mind or hijack. Our mind gets hijacked by these afflictive emotions. And then we find ourselves acting out in some unhealthy way. So we need to have compassion for ourselves. Yeah, we need to feel compassion for ourselves that we're in this situation. Okay. And not beating ourselves up or hating ourselves doesn't do any good at all. It just makes things worse. Okay. So try to think like, you know, of somebody else, somebody you care about. And if they get caught up in afflictive emotions and they act out and do something harmful, okay, probably because you care about this person, you will feel kindness towards them. You'll feel compassion and forgiveness for them. Okay. Especially if they say, I'm sorry and I regret what I did, then you'll have compassion for them. So try to take that same attitude that you can have for another person, like your sister, and apply that to yourself. Just as I can forgive that person, I need to forgive myself. I need to have compassion for myself. Okay? So that's a good way of doing that. And also, yeah, reflect on emptiness. There is no inherently existing I who does actions. Okay, there's just this body and mind aggregates, many different parts, labeled I, labeled Wei Cheng, and you know that there's no I in there, no real I who does negative actions and so on. So contemplate that as well. But yeah, just look out for that attitude that says I am bad and blaming yourself and hating yourself. Try to recognize that when it's coming up and understand that attitude is not healthy, not right, not something to follow. Say, put that aside, no, and replace it with kindness and compassion for yourself. And yeah, the fault is really our afflictions, ignorance, selfishness, attachment, anger. These are just afflictive states of mind. They are not who we are.
Thank you very
Just
much.
try to remember that. Okay?
Thank you.
So maybe we can stop now. Yeah. I have to go and finish my prayers. So let's just take a few moments to make a dedication of the positive energy we have created by doing this, coming together, listening, thinking about these teachings. So just as we thought in the beginning that we would like to benefit all beings and help all beings reach enlightenment, so let's dedicate in the same way. May this positive energy we have created be a cause for us to be free of all suffering and the causes of suffering, especially ignorance, and may it help all of us reach enlightenment as quickly as possible. Okay, thank you so much and see you next week.
Thank you, Venerable. Yeah. And a gentle reminder to everyone, please be punctual for the future sessions. So, thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.